Today on Cadella, we're speaking with Brian Noland, the CEO of Anywhere Science.
So part of the reason we get the quality of data that we get is that we take each lot and we physically calibrate them in our factory.
He's here to tell us about their company's new product called LabStrip. Hi Brian, thank you for being on Cadella today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anywhere Science has designed something called LabStrip, which is designed to transform your iPhone into a personal mobile laboratory. Can you tell us how it does this?
Sure thing. So what we've done is simply augmented the native capabilities of today's smartphones, and we started off with the iPhone 4. And the idea was to be able to mash that up with standard chemicals test strips that a lot are familiar with. And so what we do is we've designed what we call the LabStrip meter, and the phone just inserts into the meter. This is a low-cost meter, and this is now a deployable laboratory. And so what it does is off the back end, we've got a place where you can put your strips, we call the strip nest, and it just simply images the strip, and on the cloud server, we're able to interpret the data and upload it to the cloud.
Is that ever neat? What would you actually use that for? What would the strips be measuring?
Well, there's a number of places where people use strips today, and in fact, it's semi-daunting in terms of the number of potential verticals. But one of the main uses that we think is going to be really popular is with pool and spa care. And so these strips are now commercially available from a number of vendors, but we've made a deal with one of the larger well-known vendors to be able to buy them at high cost and sell them essentially the same price you would find them in a pool and spa store. And what this allows you to do is the typical parameters that you care about for taking care of your pool and spa. And this would include pH, alkalinity, free chlorine, and then cyanuric acid stabilizer.
I'm curious, why did you see a need to create this product?
Well, I would say that my business partner Cass and I both have a passion for technology, and what we're seeing is a tendency for more of everyday life to be quantified. And so we saw an opportunity with all of these test strips. These are in general, they're very well accepted. A lot of people understand how to use them. They're very simple. You dip the strip, you get a result. But there's a qualitative or a subjective nature in how you interpret these things, because on the back of each of the bottles or boxes, there's a little color chart. And each person interprets those colors slightly differently depending on the light and your eyes, or your color acuity. We thought, wow, if we could just train the smartphones to be able to interpret the strips, we could make that a much more objective measure, and then be able to automatically save that data and store it on the cloud. Because most of the time when people do this testing, they don't have a record. So the record keeping, the ability to combine that with today's smartphone technology, it just made sense.
Now, you previously mentioned this, but the data is stored on a cloud. How would that work?
Okay, so we decided that we needed a strong back-end cloud component to be able to store the data, because we didn't want to have them locked up on the phone. That we could, in addition to the parameters that you're measuring in the field from the chemical test strips, what we could do is if we put that on the cloud, we could marry it up with a number of other parameters coming from the internet. And the easiest one for, I think, people to understand right out of the gate is environmental data from places like WeatherBug, where you can pull down environmental temperature parameters, barometric pressure, wind speed. And so you might understand why that would be good to be able to marry that all together. And to store that on the cloud only seemed to make sense because you have a limited storage capacity on your phone, and we can do a lot more calculation on our server than we can do on the phone, even though the phone is an incredible computer.
I understand that you can actually collaborate with others as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we've set the cloud system up to allow a number of different layers of collaboration, all the way from being completely open if you choose to do so, if you're collaborating on a large-scale project like we would envision for some of the elementary to high school projects. We would imagine we'd want to keep that fairly open for students to collaborate, all the way to small businesses or other laboratories that don't necessarily want to give access to anyone to their private data. And so those permissions are easily changed on the cloud server.
And one thing we should probably highlight too, how does it actually work? Would you buy a kit? Would you download software? Can you walk us through the steps of how you would go about this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the way we envision it is we are drawing on the installed base of the phone themselves. So we're not expecting people to go out and buy phones specifically to do this. And then what we would sell is, like you suggest, meters by themselves as well as kits. And we have a feeling the kits are probably going to be the most popular item that we sell because the meter by itself doesn't really get you much. What you need is the strips along with it. And we sell the strips themselves. So you don't just go on to Amazon and buy these strips. We buy them in bulk from well-known manufacturers, and we affix a QR code that you scan with your phone. And what that does is link you up with the calibration that we store in the cloud. So part of the reason we get the quality of data that we get is that we take each lot and we physically calibrate them in our factory, and then that calibration, a very elaborate calibration, is then stored on the cloud, and you scan that barcode with your phone. It instantly links you up, and so you have to calibrate nothing when you're out in the field. You just simply stick the strip in the meter and hit measure. And the other nice thing about that is that each barcode is box specific, so it will be aware of how many strips were in the package, so it can keep track of how many you have left. And once you fall below a certain watermark that you specify, you can either have it remind you to buy more strips, or even better, in our opinion, is just go ahead and automatically reorder you another box.
Where do you plan on taking this? Are you going global or just in the States? Where can we look for this?
Well, we'd love to take it globally. In fact, the iPhone is a fairly well installed base around the world. Most of our marketing initially has focused on the U.S. just simply because the distribution channel we have currently. But through our strip manufacturers, we may be able to access additional markets outside the U.S. Canada is also an easy place for us to get a start. And we also think that that even in the developing world, it may be a viable solution for certain problems that folks have, because we're targeting a fairly low price point. We'd like to sell the meter for $20 or less, and the kits for maybe starting at $30 or less, $35.
Well, Brian, it's been great having you on Cadella today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us the exposure.
For more information on Anywhere Science and LabStrip, visit us at cadella.com.